Welcome to Intro to Watercolor, Module 2 with Janet VanEerden. Today we are going to talk about ratios of water to paint and playing with those to get a feel with that. In the last module, we did talk about this very briefly, but today I want to dive in there a little bit more deeply, and so you can get started or keep working on playing with your water to pigment ratios. So I will switch my camera to the document. Okay, now that you can see my workspace, I have a picture here that was a little exercise when I was working on poppy classes. And I think this little exercise is such a great illustration of the power of layering light glazes. So what that means is you can see that there are several layers of petals here, and the way that we can see the differences in transparencies and the many lines show us that these layers were put on dry. If the top layers were put on when the bottom layers were wet, you would not see this dark definition between the top layers. So that very transparent layer had more water than pigment, and some of the ones that went on top, this is still transparent, but you can see there's a little bit more pigment in it. And adding different washes of varying degrees of pigment added makes a lovely, lovely picture. So when you are experimenting with this kind of thing, I sometimes like to pull out just a blank sheet of paper and then pick a little shape. Here they're almost like commas or teardrops, and you can see that I used a mixture of blues and pinks, and then some purple got made. But it is a way to practice with varieties. You can see some of the marks very transparent, very light. That means more water was in the mix. And then some of these have a darker value of pigment. There was more pigment in the mix. And on something like this, I might take a brush full of paint and paint with it. And then as you continue to paint with it, you'll have less and less on the brush. And if I dip that brush in water, I'll have more water. So this is something that you really just want to spend some time experimenting with and have fun with. I've done a lot of different iterations of that. This was just playing around, kind of a little abstract. And you can see here as I was building this, some of the underneath layers, the underneath, I guess the first washes were very transparent. And you can see on some of them, there's more pigment. You can see the line of backwash here where the water pooled and dried. So all of these things have to do with your control of how much water, how much pigment, and keeping paint where you want it. Or in the case here, there was water in the middle. Excuse me. So that blue crept right into the middle, which is fine. Sometimes pieces like this, I will add a scripture verse or I'll add an encouraging quote, and they make very lovely little framed pieces. But if I cared about not having that in the middle, then that would be a mistake. But when I'm playing around like this, I don't consider anything a mistake. It's just learning. And once you get words put on this in a strategic way, that kind of intrusion into the middle could be actually quite nice. So let's look at some of this as an exercise. I'm going to go back to this little floral. And Experimenting with your paints is really important because each different pigment has its own characteristics. I believe this is cadmium red, and cadmium red, I tend to find does this really nice little gathering of pigment at the edge of the water to make almost like an outline. It's not necessarily an outline, but the more you play with the pigments you have, the more you'll find any kind of fun characteristics that your paints have like that. So I'm going to pull, I have a bowl of water here that's off camera. And my pigments are off camera. I'm going to pull them in just for a second here. This is cadmium red. So like we talked about in the last one, I'm just adding a little bit of water to activate that. It does look, it has almost an orange tinge to it. This red next to it, I can't even read that anymore. And these are not necessarily Winsor Newton. This is a palette I was given a long time ago that I like to play with. Alizarin Crimson is actually off camera, so let me pull it in there to show you. This is Alizarin Crimson. I use this a lot as well. And so you'll want to get to know the pigments that you have so you can learn their qualities and what you can do with them. So I just added water to the alizarin crimson and the cadmium red, and then just experiment with how much water. You can see there's a fair bit of pigment in that wash. So if I want to add more water to my brush, I can. And for this little play, I'm just using my brush to go in a pattern that resembles a petal. Here, I'm just soaking up a little bit of that extra paint and pigment. And I'll come back in here. And you can see that I'm getting a little bit more transparent as I go. And dragging some more of this. So this petal, I'm going to do this way because it's kind of facing me to the front. So the perspective on that one is going to be a little bit different. And we're not making a clock here. Nothing has to be perfect. We're just learning. And I just dipped into my paint again to grab another bit of pigment. That's a lot. So if I want to, I just rinsed off my brush, dried off my brush, and I'm going to soak up some of that pigment. Just take it away so that my under layer is mostly that light transparent. So I have a little bit sticking out there. If I lift from right there right now, I'll probably lift too much. So I'm just going to let that go. When I practice something like this, I often go in and do several, just playing with it, because the picture that I just showed you, the reference kind of picture, was just one in a series of something like this where I'm just painting a bunch of them. So you can have some that are facing differently. Maybe this one we're seeing almost from the back. And maybe that's going to go that way. And oftentimes in a composition, which this is really more practice than anything, but odd numbers are nice. So we'll do here, this petal is facing us. Kind of, we're going to see the flat edge of it. And then this one is kind of out to the side. And we have some pointing up. But one thing that has happened for me since I've been painting is noticing in nature, if I'm looking at a flower garden, they are not all going to be frontal facing me. And that shows us a very different perspective when we're painting. And every time even this exercise, practicing with different amounts of water and different amounts of pigment, we still are thinking about perspective. Now, this flower right here has some blank space between it. I'm going to bring in this reference here as well. A little bit. One of the things that makes paintings kind of messy early on is I didn't leave any white space between the petals there. It's really easy for paintings to start kind of looking like a blob when there's no separation here. Even in this example, the lightness of my first wash on the petal, I can see there was a little bit of separation between some of the petals, and then we filled in with it with another layer. So keep that in mind. And if you are painting and you say, gosh, it just feels like a blob, then you might just need to leave a little bit more space between the petals and what you're doing. But I'm not too worried yet, because I can make some differentiation on this one with some different layers and colors and values. So we're having fun here. We're not too excited about perfection. We're learning, and that, so don't worry, just keep painting. And then on this little example here, I had some, I'm feeling like that stem is just coming from there. This one is going to come from here, and this one's going to come from right here. So I am being patient while I let that top part dry. So maybe I go in here and I put a little something on the bottom. Now, one of the things to think about here is if I paint up into a wet area, that green is going to crawl right up into any wet areas. And I don't necessarily want that. So I'm going to let that be and be impatient to let each layer dry to the point that you want it to dry is really going to help you not have crazy colors traveling everywhere that you don't want them to travel. Again, on this little exercise, if you choose to do it, layering in your second layer of petals, let the bottom ones dry if you want these defined petals. When you go in and put in your violet or your purple, there's just a hint of that showing between petals. Everything should be very dry. If you put that petal, that middle stuff in while anything is wet and it touches the wet, it will crawl right out into wherever the water will take it. In a lot of flowers I do, that looks beautiful. So sometimes you'll want it to do that. And in that case, it's good to know you can use it to get the effects that you want. But the reason that I pulled this to talk about how much water and how much control was the fact that you can see the layers of transparency and different shading and building layers and form and texture with those layers. So this area is looking pretty dry. So we're good there. So we're going to grab a little bit of the other color, alizarin crimson. And if you want to have a look at it on another section of your paper, see, that's another really actually good idea to see what transparency are you going to get with the amount of water you have in your wash right now. So we have very lower, and then at the top end, again, it's higher. Like we did the first time, we can lift some if we want, but we got to be careful about making blooms that we don't want if we get too much of a puddle anywhere. So keep all these things in mind while you're practicing. So doing some middle overlapping here. You can see I made that layer a little bit with a little bit more concentrated, a little bit more pigment in that one. Gonna lift a little bit of that up. And sometimes I just realized that that lower petal is facing me. It's not one of those big outward facing ones, but you can see the idea there. We did get another layer on there, and so let's say this one is the one sticking out the middle, so we can put a layer in there. And there we can just layer some on top of the outside. Here, I'm only going to paint in down below here because that petal down in the front is facing us, so these are coming up behind there. So I can blend some of these colors in here, just leave the look of that underpainting up there. And so you can see this method of building some texture on these petals. There, I'm coming in with a little bit more pigment. And I've kind of changed the way that bottom one looks, but that's okay. It's a learning curve and an experiment. And I'm going to put a little bit of this right underneath here, because that petal is facing us. And then when we put in the centers in some of these, that'll add some definition as well. When you're adding your purple, one of the things I like to do so my colors are related is use one of the reds that I've got in the picture with a blue so that my color is related. So I'm going to take some of that cadmium and I'm going to add it to some, I think that's a little, it's really dark. Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty dark. Let me see what happens with my alizarin crimson and that blue. Yeah, I like that a little bit better. It's a little not quite as dark. I am not going to put it in right now because I have a lot of water sitting in there. So it's going to go everywhere. But one of the things I do like to do with some purples on flowers, I didn't really do it on this. This was really a quick little exercise, but sometimes I add just a little bit of the purple at the base of the flower. And that just indicates where the shade is. The sun has not hit that. So it gives a little bit of depth. And on one like this, I might use a little bit in the center to look just another part of layering those the texture on the middle of that flower here. And there's a lot of water sitting right there. So this is the danger zone. I probably should have gone there before it dries. So I'm going to let that dry a little bit. You can't really see it here, but this, I left a lot of water on there. Just taking my dry brush to soak a little bit of that up. And there's still a sheen on the paper there, so it's not very dry. I'm going to grab some of my purple that I just mixed up, and I'm going to put just a hair of that underneath here as an indication of some shade. And sometimes like if I blend it out and I take too much off, I add a little bit more back in. But that is an excellent way to build some depth into a scene with flowers. And sometimes I have a hair dryer close to me because to get a little bit like this dried, a hair dryer can be a really, really great tool. But I don't have it here, so that's okay. I'll just be patient. Just testing. I like to have a piece of scrap paper close to me while I'm painting so that I can test colors that I'm mixing to see if that's what I want. Is that close to what I'm looking for, or if I have to mix some more. So you can see that as I've lost some of the red from that one, but that's okay. It's very related. And I'm getting close to where I think I might be able to pop some little bit of middle in. Well, you can see there, it's running a little bit. So we'll pick some of that up. And this is patience is a virtue, right? And some of these we might want to just let dark, depending on what else we have going on. And we're going to pause the camera so that can dry, and we'll pop in those centers. One of the things that I notice is as I'm going on this demonstration, I'm using this brush for the petals and whatnot, and it's holding, because of the size of the brush, it's holding a lot more water. So when I'm adding that much water, I'm doing it. I'm illustrating what we're talking about here. I want a more concentrated pigment. I don't want as much water for this part of the work. So let's say I'm going to pop in a little peak at the center right there for that one. I don't want a lot of water. I don't want that big brush carrying all of its water. And here I'm going to, again, try to put in that center, but leave just a little bit of space. On this one, you can see in there, you do see a little bit of white space between. It's just not a blob in the middle there. And let's see, is that guy dry enough? We'll see. That little detail really adds a focal point for the eye. And one of the things that I've heard over and over and over again in watercolor is a good painting will have very, very light values, some mid-tone values, and some very dark values. And that means that we have a really light color in a couple of different areas, that first underpainting. Then we have some mid-tone values, and this center that we just popped in is darker. So that gives a nice variety to what we have going on in this little exercise. If I were going to keep going, I would probably do a little bit more layering after these are all dry, just to get some of this definition like I have over here with those clear lines. And that is all about waiting for the surface to dry completely. So I hope that this little exercise, as easy and quick as it is, brings you some joy. And if this is something you've already, if you're experienced in watercolor, just have fun creating. And if this is new to you, the more you paint, the better you'll get. So when I was painting poppies, I literally painted hundreds of them. And you get to learn more about the perspective on them, different looks for them, and just have a lot of fun. This kind of little piece here is could be just put in the practice pile, or could be used in collage, could be cut out and sent as a postcard, put some nice words on there. But the main thing is you painted, you learned, and you enjoyed. So I hope this was fun, and I'll see you in module 3.